Imagine this: a quiet diner, open 24 hours, where the air carries the faint aroma of coffee and grease, a place where the weary traveler stops for a moment of solace, where the lonely find company in the clatter of plates and the gentle murmur of small talk. A place so ordinary it becomes invisible in the fabric of daily life. But some diners hold secrets that were never meant to surface, secrets that linger long after the last customer has left. Picture a corner booth, empty yet strangely unwelcoming, as if waiting for someone or something. A shadow flits across the window, though no one's outside. The waitress, her hand trembling, drops her tray as a sound, low, guttural, unearthly, echoes from the kitchen. Moments like these are dismissed, rationalized, and quickly forgotten. But what happens when the unexplained refuses to be ignored? When the ordinary becomes unforgettable? This moment, we bring you 3 true stories of diners that became the setting for terror. These are accounts from witnesses who lived to tell the tale, and from others whose fates remain unknown. Whether it's a phantom customer, a table that defies explanation, or a warning that comes too late, these stories will make you question what hides in the shadows of the most familiar places. So sit back, but don't get too comfortable. And whatever you do, stay with us until the end. Because what you're about to hear might just change the way you see that late-night diner run forever. In a quiet, small town, there was a diner where time seemed to stand still, a place where the same faces came and went, day after day, blending into the rhythm of an ordinary life. Among the regulars was a man who always sat in the corner booth by the window. He never ordered food, never spoke to anyone, and rarely acknowledged the world around him. To the staff and the customers, he was just part of the scenery, another unremarkable fixture of the diner. But as the weeks turned into months, they began to notice things about him, things they couldn't explain. It all started with the way he watched the world outside, not with curiosity, but with the weight of someone who had seen far too much. And then one day, he spoke, and everything changed. To the staff, he was an oddity they learned to live with. They called him the Watcher because of how he stared out the window, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as though he were waiting for something or someone. He never ordered food or drink. He never moved from his spot unless it was to leave, always at the same time, always without a word. But what unsettled them most was the feeling that his presence altered the room. Shadows seemed to stretch longer in his corner booth, flickering unnaturally under the warm diner lights. The old wall clock, reliable for years, would stop ticking at precisely 9:47 every night. Coincidentally, the moment he always left. One waitress, Lisa, joked that he was a ghost, but no one laughed for long, because deep down, they all felt it. Something wasn't right about the Watcher. Questions began to surface. Why didn't he eat? Why didn't he talk? And what was he waiting for? One rainy evening, as Lisa cleared plates from the nearby tables, she noticed the Watcher was no longer staring out the window. His eyes were on her. She paused, her hands trembling, as he gestured for her to come closer. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and gravelly, as though unused for years. "You shouldn't stay here," he said. Lisa froze. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, a folded newspaper clipping. Without another word, he stood, adjusted his coat, and walked out the door. Lisa unfolded the clipping, her eyes scanning the faded print. It was an article from the local paper, dated years ago. The headline read, "Tragic Fire Claims Lives at Local Diner." Beneath it was a photo of the very same diner she was standing in, reduced to ash. Her blood ran cold as she noticed the date on the article, the exact day she had started working there. Lisa couldn't shake the unease. The man had vanished, leaving no trace of his presence except for the chilling newspaper clipping. She asked her co-workers about him, but no one could remember seeing him come or go that night, or any other night. Desperate for answers, she went to the local library to search the archives. She found the same article, but with an eerie addition. The fire, it claimed, had started in the kitchen at exactly 9:47 p.m., the same time the diner clock had stopped for months. Lisa left the diner that night and never went back. Days later, the diner caught fire. Investigators never found the cause, but Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that the watcher had somehow warned her or was responsible. Was he trying to save her life? Or was he the reason the fire started in the first place? Even now, on stormy nights when she closes her eyes, Lisa swears she can see him in that corner booth, watching, waiting. In a small, family-owned diner nestled on the edge of a quiet town, there was one table that no one dared to sit at. The locals called it the last table, tucked away in the back corner under a flickering light. For decades, stories surrounded it, whispers of strange happenings and unexplained disappearances. Some said the table was cursed. Others claimed it was a portal to something far worse. But no one sat there. No one, until one fateful night, when a group of friends decided to test their luck. They thought it was just a silly urban legend, a harmless dare. They were wrong. It started as a night like any other. The group of four, Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Tom, were regulars at the diner. They'd heard the rumors about the last table, but never gave them much thought. Until Sarah, emboldened by a dare, suggested they sit there. "What's the worst that could happen?" she joked. Reluctantly, the group followed her lead, sliding into the booth under the flickering light. As they settled in, the din of the diner seemed to grow quieter. The air felt heavier, colder, but they laughed it off, attributing it to their overactive imaginations. Then the strange events began. Plates balanced on the table's edge toppled without warning, shattering on the floor. The lights in the diner flickered, plunging them into brief moments of darkness. And in those moments, they swore they saw shadows, figures that shouldn't have been there, standing just beyond the edges of the light. Jake tried to lighten the mood, but his voice wavered. "It's just a table, nothing to be scared of." But the unease among them grew, their laughter turning to nervous silence. What started as a joke was quickly unraveling into something they couldn't explain. And as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the friends began to realize they weren't alone. The tension broke with a piercing scream. It came from the restroom at the back of the diner. Without thinking, Jake ran to check on Tom, who had excused himself moments earlier. But when he got there, the restroom was empty. No sign of Tom. The door was locked from the inside, and a puddle of water had pooled beneath the sink. Panicked, the group gathered back at the last table. That's when Sarah noticed the carvings etched into the wood underneath. Words, deep and jagged, that hadn't been there when they first sat down. "Leave while you can." Emily gasped as the lights flickered again, casting the diner in stuttering flashes of light and darkness. In those flashes, the shadows grew clearer, dark, humanoid figures standing in a circle around the table, their faces obscured. One by one, the shadows seemed to step closer. Jake grabbed Emily's hand, shouting, "We have to go, now!" But Sarah froze, her eyes locked on the figures. "Where's Tom?" she whispered. The remaining three fled the diner, leaving behind the cursed table, the flickering lights, and the shadows that had surrounded them. But as they drove away, Emily glanced back at the diner's window. Her breath caught in her throat. There, in the glass, was Tom's reflection, staring back at her, motionless, as though he were still inside. She screamed and Jake slammed on the brakes, but when they turned to look again, the window was empty. They never saw Tom again. The diner was closed the next day, the owners citing an electrical malfunction. But the locals whispered of the last table, and how those who dared to sit there were never the same. And as for Jake, Sarah, and Emily, they couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was still with them, just out of sight, just beyond the edge of the light. On a desolate stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, there stood a small diner, its fluorescent, open 24 hours sign flickering against the inky black of the night. For most of the day, the place was a haven for truckers and weary travelers seeking a quick meal and a moment of respite. But at night, when the traffic slowed to a trickle and the parking lot emptied, the diner took on an unsettling stillness. It was during these late hours that strange things began to happen, things that no one could explain. The staff chalked it up to exhaustion, their minds playing tricks after hours on their feet. But one server, working the graveyard shift, began to suspect there was more to it. And as her long nights turned darker, she realized the slow hours were the least of her worries. The server's name was Kelly, a college student juggling classes by day and night shifts by necessity. She had been working at the diner for months, and though the shifts were long and the nights lonely, she appreciated the quiet, until the quiet began to feel wrong. It started small. A coffee mug sliding across the counter when no one was near, the faint sound of footsteps echoing from the kitchen when she was certain she was alone. At first, Kelly dismissed these incidents as her imagination, but the occurrences grew harder to ignore. One night, as she was wiping down tables, she heard it, soft whispers coming from the kitchen. She froze, her heart pounding, and called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" There was no response, only the hum of the refrigerator. Yet the feeling that someone or something was watching her was impossible to shake. Objects would vanish, only to reappear in odd places. Chairs that she had stacked at closing would be back on the floor when she turned around. Each night, Kelly felt the walls closing in, the silence more oppressive, the shadows more alive. And yet, she stayed. What choice did she have? She couldn't afford to quit. But with each shift, a question gnawed at her. Was she losing her grip on reality, or was the diner hiding something that defied explanation? Then came the night that Kelly would never forget. It was just past 3 a.m. when she heard it, a knock at the diner's front door. 3 loud, deliberate raps that echoed through the empty dining room. She froze, her eyes darting toward the glass doors. The parking lot was empty, bathed in the weak glow of a single street lamp. No car, no person, nothing. Another knock, louder this time. Gathering her courage, Kelly approached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the lock. But as she swung it open, her breath caught. No one was there. Confused and unnerved, she turned back toward the counter, and that's when she saw it. A folded piece of paper sitting neatly on the counter where there had been nothing before. Her heart raced as she opened it. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were the words, It's not safe here. Leave now." And at the bottom of the note was a name she didn't recognize, Michael Hardy. Kelly stared at the name, her mind racing. Who was Michael Hardy? What did he have to do with this diner? And why was she being warned to leave? Kelly's unease turned to obsession. She spent the next few days digging into the diner's past, searching for any mention of the name Michael Hardy. What she discovered left her cold. Michael Hardy was a trucker who had disappeared 20 years earlier after frequenting the diner on his long-haul routes. The last time anyone had seen him was late one night, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee. He had left without a word, leaving behind his truck and belongings in the parking lot. Kelly couldn't shake the feeling that the note had been left as a warning, but by whom or what remained a mystery. She tried to forget, to push the incident to the back of her mind. But every night she worked, she felt the unseen eyes watching her, the lingering presence that refused to leave. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whispers stopped. The objects stayed in place. The diner seemed normal again. But Kelly would never forget the note or the name of the man who vanished into the night. Even now, when she thinks back on those nights, one question lingers in her mind. Who knocked on that door? And were they trying to warn her, or were they trying to get in? 3 diners, 3 terrifying stories. Each one started with something ordinary, an empty booth, a familiar face, a playful dare, but ended in ways that defy explanation. What is it about these places that invites the unexplainable? Could it be the isolation of a late-night diner? The way time seems to stand still in the fluorescent glow? Or is it something far older, far darker, tied to the very ground they stand on? The next time you stop at a quiet roadside cafe, take a moment to look around. Notice the empty tables, the faces of the other customers, the faint sounds from the kitchen. Because you never know, you could be the next chapter in a tale of terror. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join us next time for another journey into the unknown. Until then, stay curious and stay safe.